Hi folks, and welcome to Truck King. Today we're looking at the Lexus TX 500h F-Sport Performance. Now this vehicle is all about moving you and your entire family in total luxury, and that's what we're going to put to the test today. So in this video, we'll look inside, we'll see just how much space there is, and then we're also going to do an all-wheel drive test. We're going to put it up on the rollers and see how it performs, so make sure you stay tuned. Let's start with the walk around. So powering this Lexus TX is a 2.4 liter turbocharged 4-cylinder mated to a hybrid setup. Total system output is 366 horsepower and 406 pound-feet of torque, and that is hooked to a 6-speed automatic transmission. Now, if that powertrain sounded familiar, well, that's because it is. It's the same powertrain that is now in the Tacoma, in the Land Cruiser, also the Grand Highlander, which is the basis of this vehicle. The Grand Highlander and TX share a platform. Now, the one difference is in these crossovers, this engine is transverse mounted. So essentially it's a front wheel drive vehicle, and then the rear axle gets its own electric motor, and we'll have more on that all-wheel drive system soon. Whereas in the Tacoma and the Land Cruiser, it is longitudinally mounted, and the engine sends its power to the rear axle first. So it is a difference there in just how the power plant is implemented, but many vehicles in the Toyota lineup have now moved over to this power plant. So the model you're looking at here is the F-Sport Performance. That changes up some of the styling. It's definitely a unique front end. It's growing on me a little bit, but I'm not sure I really like it that much. The interesting part to me is that the grille is really seamlessly integrated into the nose. On something like the GX or even the LX, the grille is totally separate. So that is an interesting difference, how it all kind of blends together. And you know what? Why don't you let me know? Drop in the comments right now and just tell me, do you think this TX is a good looking vehicle or not? Moving back, part of this F-Sport package are those beautiful 22-inch alloy wheels, and we actually still have Michelin snow tires on our Lexus today. Now here at the driver's side door, I always like to look at the payload rating here in the door jamb. So on the TX, 1,080 pounds, which is a decent number, and I'll also let you know that this vehicle with a hitch can tow up to 5,000 pounds. Now, another interesting thing in the back is where they package the battery. All of these Toyota hybrids have the battery pack here in the second row, and you can even see some of the venting down there to allow that battery to cool, and that is just over a 1 kilowatt hour battery, and it's pretty seamlessly integrated. Now, the last system I have to talk about is dynamic rear steering. Yes, this Lexus has a rear axle which can turn those wheels. Now, the interesting thing, at slow speeds, the rear wheels turn in the opposite direction as the front wheels to allow that back end to kind of rotate and get you around corners tighter. But then at high speeds, the wheels turn in the same direction. So let's say you're changing lanes on the highway, you're actually going to get your rear end sliding over like that. And in every case, it should mean better maneuverability for this vehicle, and we'll put that to the test too real soon. All right, folks, let's take a look at the interior space. Now, two interesting things right off the top. First of all, I already mentioned this is a stable mate of the Toyota Grand Highlander, but it's actually slightly larger than the Grand Highlander, so this should have even more space for people and stuff. And then our F-Sport Performance model we see here today is just a 6-seater, just 2 seats in the second and just 2 seats in the third row, which is pretty interesting. And then for baby seats, there's lower latch in all 4 positions and top tethers in all 4 rear positions, which I like. So let's climb in. This is 39.5 inches of second row legroom. And it's a ton. The nice thing is the battery is packaged under my butt, but it doesn't raise the floor where my feet are, so your feet don't end up kind of up in your chin. We'll have to see if the third is the same, but I do appreciate how they package that. It's out of the way. Headroom is fine. We do have the massive panoramic sunroof, but even not with the sunroof, I would have just enough headroom back here. And then like a lot of crossovers these days, this row does adjust. Again, many inches of adjustment, so you can pull forward to give the people in the back more space if you need to. Now for amenities, we got a sunshade over here. For the little kids, I love that. Heated and ventilated second row, my own HVAC controls, USB-C ports, and a 3-prong plug down there. And this vehicle has an inverter, which is good for 1,500 watts. So a real legitimate amount of power. And then the second row passengers also get their own little console with these funny pop-out cup holders. The whole idea here is if you don't want a cup holder, we'll take it out, and then you open up more storage where you can stash your stuff, and then if you do want it, well, you can just pop it right back down in there, which is pretty cool. Now let's see how big the third row is. So there's a button on the shoulder. These seats fold and push forward, and in I go. So this is just about 32 inches of rear seat legroom. And as I mentioned, the floor is raised for the battery pack, and that's what I feel right away. My knees do feel quite tall. It's not that comfortable. And then headroom, again, I have just enough. Actually, I would say just not enough. I'd wish there was a tiny bit more. One nice thing here in the third, though, power recline, and it reclines quite a bit, more than I think I've ever experienced in a third row. So if I was to lay back like this, I could have a nap back here. But yeah, sitting up straight, and I stand at 6'2", there's not quite enough headroom in the back. And then again, you can't forget just the 2 seats back here rather than 3. Now for amenities, I do get my own cup holders and my own USB-C port right there, plus your own HVAC vent. So yeah, the third row passengers are taken care of. They just can't be too big, because they'll be squeezed back there. Now we can look at the storage. So here in our model today, we do have a kick to open hatch, which never wants to work for me when I want it to work. The key is in the vehicle. I figured it would have gone, but maybe it has to be in my pocket. Cut to a B-roll shot of it working. Now let's look at the storage. So not a ton behind this third row here. You can see my camera bag there. That's about it. But again, keep in mind, this is just slightly more than the Grand Highlander. So if you are comparing the two, this is the one you're going to want for space. Now these seats are power folding. And once you put them down, well, something's up there blocking that one. But still, once you put them down, you do get loads of space back here. The Toyota's not happy. The Lexus, I should say. Oh, there we go. So something was blocking it. It's crushed now. But see, tons of storage space once you fold them down. So this is one of those vehicles where if you're using the third row, you're not getting a ton of storage. But if you're not using it, yeah, you're never going to have a complaint. And then finally, there's a plug back here as well, once again, to access that 1,500 watt inverter. And now it is time to put this all-wheel drive system to the test. It's a beautiful sunny day out here. We don't have any snow or sloppy weather, so we got out the rollers. The rollers essentially replicate a low traction situation, and we're doing what should be the toughest situation for the vehicle to handle. We have 3 rollers. They're under the front driver and passenger and the rear passenger side. So essentially, the Lexus needs to figure out how to get power to that rear driver side wheel in order to get us off of the rollers. Now, the interesting thing about the all-wheel drive system here is that there is no drive shaft connecting the front engine to that rear axle. The rear has its own electric motor. It's about a 75 horsepower motor, and it drives those rear wheels independently of the fronts. Now, of course, Lexus says that it is near instantaneous power that comes to the back axle, and that's what I'm interested to see. How long does it take before that axle gets power, and then how long before this thing can use traction control to figure out how to send the power. Now, it also has trail mode, but we're not going to use that first. First, we're just in totally normal drive mode, and we'll see if the all-wheel drive system can figure its way off of our rollers. So here we go. We also have a screen inside showing us the all-wheel drive, so that should be able to kind of tell me what's slipping. So we go down into drive. And here comes the power. Rolling, rolling. Oh, it's trying. Okay, well, very interesting. I can feel it trying to do something in the rear end, and I was kind of getting these little bursts of momentum, but it wasn't quite enough. Let's now turn on trail mode and see if that makes a significant difference. All right, here we go. Wow, and that was quite a bit of speed, and even still, the system couldn't figure it out. Now, I will say I'm on a slight incline here, so we're trying to fight uphill, but I gotta be honest, I'm a little surprised that it can't figure out how to get power to that rear wheel, and maybe this is one of the disadvantages to not having that physical connection. All right, folks, we are gonna keep trying just a little bit here. So again, I'm still in trail mode. And the only other trick I have up my sleeve is a little bit of left foot braking, and that's sort of the old school way. In an open differential, that's one way you can get it to send the power, is by riding that brake while you're also giving it throttle. It's not something you think you'd need to do in a vehicle like this, but let's see if that makes a difference. Otherwise, yeah, the Lexus is stuck on the rollers. Yes! Okay, so that wasn't left foot braking. I tried at the beginning and then I stopped because that didn't feel like it was helping at all. Literally what that was me feeling it, kind of rocking it a little bit, and then it felt like I built up that momentum and it was able to jump off the front. So yeah, definitely the rear axle and that rear driver's side was getting some power, but it wasn't a big push of power. And we've done this roller test with quite a few different crossovers and SUVs, and this has got to be, sadly, one of the worst outcomes we've had yet. Time for one more setup with the rollers to see how it does. We do have one roller now under the front driver and one roller under the rear passenger. So now we have one front tire and one rear on the ground. Let's see how it does now. So drive, not in trail mode, just regular mode. Here we go. Popped right off. No problem whatsoever. So yes, clearly the power is better distributed in the front end, side to side, than it is in the rear. All right, folks, now we're here driving the TX. So first of all, we need to feel the power. I've got it in sport mode, an empty road here. Let's go foot to the floor. Ooh, it even wanted to chirp the tires there. And there's 110K real quick. And I think the one thing I do want to point out, no real torque steer to mention, because again, essentially this is a front wheel drive vehicle. Now the rear axle is providing some torque, but yeah, you'd expect when you put your foot into it, the wheel to be pulling a little bit, but there was, yeah, no torque steer that I could really feel. And you could also feel the torque from the hybrid system right off the bat. You can just feel that sort of initial hit of power. It starts to get you going, and then especially once the turbo spools up and the engine hits, yeah, it's quite powerful. So power, not an issue here in the TX. You can really have some fun with it. And I mentioned I was in sport mode. We also have an eco mode here, a normal mode, and then the trail mode that you already saw. Now, I'm gonna go into actually the controls for those because a lot of the controls in this Lexus are in the head-up display and on these two touch-sensitive pads here on the steering wheel. Now, they are touch-sensitive, and as I move my thumb around, I can see what is being highlighted on the head-up display, and then you still have to press the button. But yes, the head-up display controls the drive modes. It controls my driver info screen up here, so if I want to change around what I'm looking at on my screen, I have to also use the head-up display up there. And then head-up display also, of course, you can do all your radio controls and your adaptive cruise control here. And the adaptive cruise is interesting because it has traffic jam assist in this Lexus. So you can go fully hands-free when the conditions are met. So only on certain highways and at slow speeds. But yes, you do have the hands-free driving, and that's why we get this little guy right up here. That is a sensor that's watching me, watching my eyes, and make sure I'm paying attention. When you're not using traffic jam assist, it is still watching as well, and more than once I've had the little notice pop up, hey driver, pay attention to the road. Now luckily you can shut that off, but yes, this is one vehicle that's always monitoring you to make sure you're watching. Now the other things that play with the handling and the drive are the adaptive variable suspension and the rear wheel steering. So I'm coming into these S corners here. Nice. Oh, the power feels so good too. A little bit of braking. This one's nice and sharp. And it feels good, man. You can feel the suspension going from its sort of generally soft setting, that's what it is when just rolling down the road, to nice and tight right as you're coming into that corner. And then the beauty is you come back here on the flat and straight and it kind of softens up again. So yes, the adaptive variable suspension is doing its job. It's making it feel nice in the corners. And then the rear wheel steering is absolutely noticeable from behind the wheel. Actually, at super slow parking lot speeds, I feel like you notice it the most because that is when the rear wheels are turning in an opposite direction. I'm just here, I'm gonna pull a U-turn. So you crank it, and right away, you can just feel it sort of in your butt. The back end of the vehicle is also kind of stepping out on you. It is subtle, it's not a huge difference, but it is definitely there. So the rear wheel steering in the real world, yeah, it makes a big difference, and it makes a fairly large SUV drive even smaller. So combine those two things, rear wheel steer, adaptive suspension, and the handling here is really good, but it's also matched with total comfort when cruising down the road in a straight line. Now we can look at the interior quickly. So I think this is sort of typical Lexus. It's kind of that subdued luxury feeling, but it does feel quite luxurious. I do have to go out of my way to point out these seats. The seats are quite comfortable, good bolstering, good support. So yes, I like these F Sport seats quite a bit. And then I also like what's going on down here with the center console. You can put your phone down for the wireless charging, but the wireless phone charging tray actually slides and it opens up into more storage. I feel like I've never seen that in a vehicle where the wireless phone tray can actually move, because of course that's going to require some type of different wiring or routing, but Lexus did that here. And then plus up front as well, I get these funny removable cup holders. So if you want a cup holder, it's there. If you don't want it, take it out and you get more space. So yes, I like the use of space. And then all of the luxury features you sort of expect these days are here, like the wireless phone charging, like wireless Android Auto and Apple CarPlay, like my rear view camera mirror up here, and that massive head-up display that I mentioned earlier. So all of the luxury boxes are definitely checked here in the TX. And I said this before, but I think I'll just drive it home. When you are just driving, nicely and cruising comfortably, it's quiet, it is comfortable, it has that air of luxury just in the way that it drives down the road. And of course it better, because this TX you see in the video as it sits is $92,000 Canadian. So no one's gonna call it an affordable vehicle, but $492. I actually feel like you're getting a pretty decent amount of luxury, and it helps that it's such a big vehicle. So yes, for that price, you're also going to be able to bring lots of people and stuff with you anywhere you go. I should mention fuel economy now, especially because this is a hybrid, and it's one of the reasons you might go for the hybrid. So I've been getting about 9.5 liters per 100 kilometers in my week with this TX, and I've had my whole family in here, all 3 kids. So yes, I've been hauling some people, and getting under 10 liters per 100 in such a big SUV feels pretty good. Now, I also want to talk about how this thing fits into the Lexus lineup, because it's different from their other SUVs. You can also get the Lexus GX or the Lexus LX. Of course, those things are big, body on frame, much more rugged SUVs, whereas the TX feels more related to the RX. And now you might remember Lexus brought out that RXL, that L being long wheelbase, because they wanted a third row in the RX, but it just wasn't big enough. The L model was slightly bigger than the RX. The third row wasn't that comfortable for full-size adults, so they learned their lesson. If you're gonna add the third row, do it for real. Give us a proper size third row, and that's what the TX is. So yes, that's sort of the difference between the body on frame, sort of big SUVs, and then the unibody, smaller SUVs. And the from behind the wheel, the difference is how they handle. The larger SUVs, yeah, they feel like big, bulky SUVs. This TX drives smaller than it actually is. And then finally, what does it compete with? Well, I think the most direct competitor is probably the Acura MDX. And when it comes to third row space, this TX is way better than the MDX. And in my opinion, that's one of the most important things, because if you're going for this SUV, there's a good chance you want to use that third row. So I do appreciate that from the Lexus over the Acura. Well, folks, we are now coming to the end of this one. So I really like the size of this TX. Legroom is great. The third row is pretty good. And then the drive on a beautiful sunny day like this is so comfortable, and the handling is great. I think my only downside is what we saw happen on the rollers. Going for this E-axle in the back with no physical connection. I like the idea of it, but then of course in practice, if you are in sort of a real situation, probably off-road, but who knows, maybe you're just in some deep snow where only one tire is getting proper traction. It's just not the best at routing that power to where you need it. I will say I think those situations could be classified as extreme. For most driving just around the roads, the all-wheel drive system would be enough, but it is something to note. If you want something that's a little more sort of hardcore, you probably want to look at a GX or an LX. But at the end of the day, these things are going to live their life on road, and when you're driving around, yeah, it's a beautiful, comfortable cruiser for you and your whole family. So yeah, folks, that's the end of this one. Now I want to hear from you. What do you think of the TX? What do you think of the roller test? Give me your opinions. Drop them down there in the comments below. While you're down there, don't forget to hit that like button, mash that subscribe button, hit join to become a member of Truck King, and then come right back here to see what we're testing next.